is, why would a president of the United States pit hungry children against sick children? And that is what President Trump has done. I mean, this is outrageous. We can't reach agreement on government funding, so the government shuts down, and even though the law is clear that he could fund SNAP benefits during a shutdown, he did not. And then he also said, and by the way, I don't really care if people's health insurance premiums get so high they can't afford their care. That's on Donald Trump. My vote today was to do two things, both equally morally important and imperative. One is to make sure that the government is functioning so that our kids eat, so that our elderly citizens eat, so that our air traffic controllers can get some sleep and earn money, get paid while they are working, so that our veterans are protected, and continue the fight to a realistic platform to get the premium tax cuts done. And if that is not successful, then shame on the Republican Party and shame on Donald Trump. But the American people will see who stands with them on health care and who does not. And that will be the platform of the next stage of the fight. I hope we can find bipartisan agreement on an extension of those premium tax credits. In New Hampshire, couples who are 60 years old or so, earning $85,000 a year, are seeing like a $15,000 increase in their insurance premiums. This has to get fixed. And we have about a month to do it before the harm gets to be irreparable. And again, if the Republicans can't come to the table and do something reasonable on this and make sure that people can afford their health care and that the whole private commercial market also doesn't see skyrocketing increases, then shame on them.
Senator, what do you say to the millions of Americans who are already in the Obamacare exchanges, seeing premiums skyrocketed, who were hoping because of what you all said that they would get answers on what their premiums would be now, but have to wait weeks longer since you've decided to open the government without immediate action on the subsidies?
Well, as Senator Hassan said so well, the Republicans weren't any commitment or even a willingness to vote or a willingness to discuss extending the premium tax credits. We have the opportunity to do that now, and we will hold their feet to the fire.
And just quick, most of us up here in the group of 8 that voted for this tonight have voted repeatedly with the Democratic strategy of we're not opening and we want you to take action on the ACA tax credit. But after 40 days, it wasn't going to work. So here we are in a situation, and this was the reality. SNAP recipients suffering, nothing happening on ACA. The vote tonight will be full, and not just last year's, but full and robust SNAP funding for SNAP recipients and a path on the ACA. So from suffering and no path, we've now got robust benefits and a path. And that's what we tell our constituents.
Senator, if I could just ask, there's already calls now from Democrats in the House that are saying Leader Schumer should step aside, he should be replaced. You know, the 8 of you today voting with Republicans to advance this plan to reopen the government, does that just further the divides within the Democratic Party right now?
No. When I talk to my constituents in New Hampshire, you know what they say to me? They say, why can't you all just work together to address the problems that are facing this country? We put the Senate back on a path to start doing that today, and we're going to continue to work that way.
All right, one last question.
If the president doesn't agree and the Republicans block the extension of AC subsidies, would you guys be willing to vote again against government funding in January when this funding runs out?
That's certainly an option that I think everybody will consider. Thank you all.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everybody. Senator King?
Is that one?
Angus.
It's not mine.
That's mine.
Yeah, okay.
Angus, can I grab it?
Can I ask you on the RIF stuff? Yeah. What was the process with the White House? They were involved.
government will be reopened tonight or tomorrow morning. And all I can say is it's about time. It's been 40 days too long. But we also know that there's going to be some vote in the not so distant future on what do we do about high health insurance costs, and then hopefully another vote as to what can we do about the high health care costs that are driving the high health insurance costs. And we need to talk now. We can't just come upon the vote and suddenly have a solution. Rather, people need to be thinking about it between now and then, about the solutions that benefit the American people. Clearly, we have a problem with the affordability of health care and of health insurance. And of course, that's related. And this is something that in my professional life as a physician, I addressed over 20-something years before entering political life. I practiced in a public hospital for the uninsured for over 2 decades, seeing middle-income and lower-income Americans, fellow Americans, who for whatever reason couldn't afford their insurance or couldn't afford their health care, and they came to the hospital for the uninsured. Now, so, health insurance, health care costs, very complicated. And we've got to be a little bit more creative than just the federal government throwing money at it. Obamacare tried to do that, and it has not worked. The enhanced premium tax credits, or the EPTC, is the latest example. It was a COVID program unrelated to the original Obamacare program, and the enhanced premium tax credits sent billions of taxpayer dollars straight to the insurer, hoping that families would see smaller bills. But you know, it might paper money over the high health insurance costs, but it did nothing for health care costs. And by the way, it also made health insurance more expensive for many. So I think we can do better than just hiding the cost of high health care and high health insurance costs by the federal government spending billions more. So, an idea that I'm asking my colleagues and the American people to consider is a pre-funded federal flexible spending account. Now, let me make a couple things clear. First, I am not speaking for John Thune, the majority leader. I'm not speaking for Donald Trump. In fact, although I'm the chairman of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pension Committee, I'm more speaking as Bill Cassidy, a doctor that worked with the uninsured for 20 years and is now representing the great state of Louisiana. And I'm speaking to my colleagues and to fellow Americans, asking all of us to put aside our prejudice, to put aside our kind of, oh no gosh, a Republican's proposing it or a Democrat's proposing it, so therefore I must oppose. No, to actually come together in good faith to try and find a solution. So let me first describe what I'm speaking of. First, there are 2 types of tax credits on the Affordable Care Act exchanges, the Obamacare exchanges. And I'm going into this for a reason. One is the baseline tax credit that was enacted into law in 2010 that lowers premium costs for those less than 400% of federal poverty. So, first one started in 2010 under Obamacare, the original legislation. It goes to people making less than 400% of federal poverty. During COVID, there was another sum added called the enhanced premium tax credit. And that gives some extra benefits to those less than 400% of federal poverty level, but began to cover people over 400% of federal poverty level. So 2 pots of money. One pot dates from 2010, part of the original Affordable Care Act law, and the other passed by the Biden administration during the COVID pandemic, benefiting those above 400% of federal poverty. What I'm proposing does not touch that baseline. What I'm about to propose does not touch the monies that were set aside in 2010 under the Affordable Care Act. Why do I say that? President Trump endorsed the concept I'll be speaking of, and one of my Democratic colleagues said, wait, are you going to give all the insurance money for these accounts? No, time out. Absolutely not. We're going to leave that portion which was part of the baseline alone, not touching it at all, but trying to do something with the enhanced premium tax credits that only began most recently by President Biden under the COVID pandemic. That begs the question, why were enhanced premium tax credits necessary? Premiums had gone up so much. The Affordable Care Act was supposed to lower the cost of health care. The cost of health care has exploded. The cost of health insurance has exploded. And unfortunately, under the enhanced premium tax credit, it doesn't matter what the premium is. The federal taxpayer throws billions more at it. And the insurance company lost the incentive to negotiate down prices because whatever the price was, the taxpayer would help pay for it. And we misaligned the incentives to where the insurance companies actually do better if health care costs are high. Now, by the way, I'm not here to bash insurance company. We need them. They're essential. But everybody's going to respond to incentives, and the incentive here is not the right incentive. So how can we do something different? Well, I'd like to empower the patient instead of sending billions to the insurance company. And if we can put in programs that lower health care costs, we may still have premiums that are too high this year because, my gosh, we only got 2 months until the next plan year starts. But we're going to be able to substitute out these enhanced premiums with something which doesn't go to the insurance company but goes to you, the patient. And we're going to begin the process of aligning the incentives for giving the patient the incentive to find the better deal. And that begins to lower cost. By the way, that means that we have to think differently. Now, let's try a new approach as opposed to just sending paper money to paper over the high health care costs and the resultant high premiums. Where does our health care, this is kind of my idea, Mr. President. Right now we have the enhanced premium tax credit, which I've been speaking of. It goes to the insurance company. That says 80. I'm just going to mark that out right now. I'm just going to, right now, Mr. President, give me just a second. I'm going to take this down, I'm going to go like this, and I'm going to go 20. And but that 20 is the administrative cost and the profit that the insurance companies take out of every dollar you take them. I wish I had a marks a lot. My assistants get me a marks a lot. I think you have to do that. Oh, right there. No, because I had a misprint last night. I don't want it to be misprinted now. This should be 20. 20 of that 26 billion we're going to send them next year. 20% of the 26 billion goes to profit and it goes to administrative cost. Can we do it better? By golly, we can. Mr. President, here we go. I'm going to get this out of here. I'm just bugged the heck out of this. This should say 20. 20% of the 26 billion we send them next year would go to profit and administrative overhead. What if we give the patient the power? What if we say it goes to an account that she controls, that she can spend on her physician, her dental care, her prescriptions, on her eyeglasses. She can spend it on orthodontia. She can spend it on more things than this. And by the way, 100% of the 26 billion would go to the real care that that woman and her family needs. So we need to empower her, not give 20% of $26 billion to insurance companies. Nothing against insurance companies. God bless them, we need them. But if I have a choice of empowering you or empowering them, 100% to you or 20% to them, my vote's with you. And I think we as a Congress, no matter what your political party, should all vote the same way. I want to emphasize something here, by the way. This is pre-funded. People think about flexible spending accounts and they think, well, my gosh, this poor person, 120% of federal poverty, 150% of federal poverty, has to put their own money into this. No. We take the dollars that are in the enhanced premium tax credit and we put them there instead, and it's pre-funded. So, a little different than we normally think of flexible spending accounts, but it still works. Now, a couple of things I've heard from my Democratic colleagues, by the way. My Democratic colleagues are concerned that whatever we pass over here will not get a vote in the House of Representatives. I'm pleased to say, yesterday, President Trump tweeted in favor of this proposal. I'm sure he would ask Mike Johnson to take it up. If Democrats want to vote on something that benefits the American people, and by the way, here's the tweet, You can't read this. It's classic President Trump. He's talking about money-sucking insurance companies. And then in all caps, he goes, be sent directly to the people so that they can purchase their own much better health care. That's the president's way of emphasizing, let's give power to the people, not send 20% of the money to the insurance companies. And as I said, with this tweet, the president indicating his support, I think we can rely upon him to ask Speaker Johnson to bring it up in the House of Representatives. So if Democrats want to vote on something that will have a vote in the House, they got it right there, the president's endorsement. I think this works all the way around. And let me say once more, after the president tweeted, I'm going to repeat, but it's important to repeat because this is a point of misunderstanding. After the president tweeted this, one of my Democratic colleagues said, wait, are you going to give all the money to this account for these people? And the answer is no. The baseline continues to go to buy the health insurance policy, but that enhanced premium tax credit is the sum that goes there. And I'm just going to say this once more. It is the enhanced premium tax credit that goes there. Now, the other thing I hear, this is way too complicated. No way, can't do it. Can't do it. Turns out, I have a flexible spending account. Over 70% of government employees in the United States of America have a flexible spending account as one of their offerings. Over 40% of those in the commercially insured market have a flexible spending account as one of their offerings. The state of Indiana has used something similar to this for their Medicaid population, and it's worked extremely well. This is not so complicated that federal employees, Medicaid recipients, you name it, 70% of our fellow Americans have the option of choosing this if they work for a government entity, and over 40% if they work for a business. So this is something which is already out there. And then I'm told, well, the federal government has to set it up. You know, I will point out that I am on an Obamacare policy through the Small Business Exchange. My FSA is already administered by the federal government through the Small Business Obamacare Exchange. All we're asking them to do is to open that window a little bit more and to take in the individual market Obamacare exchange. We already have the existing mechanisms to do this within the federal government. This can be done. We should not consider it so complicated to accomplish. Now, inevitably, there's going to be some bureaucrat that says they need 6 months to open a window. And that's why I'm glad President Donald Trump is the president when this is coming up. Because if there's one guy that can cut through the bureaucratic, I'm a gastroenterologist and certain terms came to mind. And you're a farm state, maybe they do to you. But the one guy that can cut through the stuff that seems an obstacle to others, it's President Donald Trump. I always smile. Operation Warp Speed, they said it might take 18 months, maybe 10 years to get a vaccine to market, and President Trump's leadership led it to being in people's arms from before we started within 11 months. This man can make it happen. So I don't consider it too complicated for the patient to understand, and I don't consider it too complicated for the federal government to adapt to, which means we could even do it in 2026. Now, next thing I hear, is it going to cost money? It's going to cost money. And again, my Democratic colleagues should like this because the first year, it'll cost about the same as the enhanced premium tax credits. Because right now, we're 2 months from the beginning of the year, and there's not a whole lot of time for reforms to be put in place to lower the cost of health care. So for our fellow Americans who are depending upon this, we can fix it for them. But now, we also have the opportunity to pass other reforms that truly will lower the cost of health care. So come 2027, these reforms, those reforms begin to work down the cost of health care, and we as Americans will benefit not just in the Obamacare exchanges, but in the commercial market, in the Medicare space, in other spaces as well. We begin to lower health care costs for all. That's more value for the individual, more value for the employer, more value for the taxpayer. So the choice is before us. We can continue to try and paper over the cost of health insurance by throwing billions more at it. Under the enhanced premium tax credit, the money goes to insurance companies and 20% gets hung up in administrative cost and profit. Or we can spend 100% of it in pre-funded flexible spending accounts benefiting patients and their families. What can it be used for? Under the enhanced premium tax credit, you're choosing to use it for insurance premiums and whatever the insurance company thinks you should get. Under the pre-funded flexible spending account, you decide. Or, since I'm looking at a Senator Kramer's wife decides, because women make most of these decisions, and she'll decide to pay for dental, physician, glasses, prescriptions, or orthodontia, you name it, she gets to pick. Who makes the decision? Under the enhanced premium tax credit, insurance companies. Under the pre-funded flexible spending account, the patient does. The mother does. The wife does. These are the people that will then make the decisions. And does it lower cost? No. Under the enhanced premium tax credit, it drives premiums up. Under the pre-funded flexible spending account, we empower patients to shop, to find the best deal for their dollar. That drives competition, and that lowers cost. Mr. President, I cannot imagine why anybody would choose the status quo of enhanced premium tax credits versus giving the patient the power. We should give the patient the power. And I say this, and I want to be very clear here. I am not being partisan. I am being in good faith trying to say that everyone should put their party behind them, put their partisan politics behind them, and be focused only on how do we lower health care costs for the average American. No, for all Americans. How do we lower health care costs? That should be our focus. My staff asked if I'm wearing a purple tie because I'm bipartisan. I said, no, I'm wearing a purple tie because LSU lost badly last night, and I thought we should encourage them. So this is my LSU Tiger tie. That said, just so it works out that I am really emphasizing this is something that we can work on together. President Trump's for it, and I'd like my Democratic colleagues to consider it. Not just reject it because a Republican proposes, but to actually realize it's in good faith trying to find a solution for the high health care costs that are hurting American families. Let's take a risk. Let's take a risk. Let's be bold. Let's do something different than we've done before. No, the same thing we've done before, but we've done it in a different space. We've done it on the small business Obamacare exchange. We've done it through our employer. We've done it through the Indiana Medicaid program. Let's try it in the individual exchange. Let's just trust that patient to make wise decisions for ourselves as opposed to treating them like something the federal government has to tell them what to do. I'll return where I started. As a doctor who took care of the uninsured for 20 years, I always found that my patients, even if they weren't really educated, but you explained the options to them, they made wise decisions. They made sophisticated decisions. When you gave them control of their health care and you allowed them to make that wise decision. Let's trust the American people, Mr. President. Let's give power to the patient, not billions to the insurance companies. And with that, I yield.
Today is the 40th day of the government shutdown. It's been so long, a recap is in order. As I've said before, Iowans don't plan their lives around what we do here in Congress. But the Democrats' failure to support a clean, bipartisan funding bill has caused pain, suffering, and uncertainty for the American people. Let's remember, it's Democrats who caused the shutdown, and got us into this mess. All but 3 Democrats have repeatedly voted against a clean, continuing resolution to fund government agencies and programs. Even at the Biden era levels, they won't even support funding that their Democrats have voted for and supported for the last 4 years prior to Trump's reelection. All we need is 5 more Democrats. There are not any partisan policy priorities from either side. That's why we call it a clean government funding resolution. Republicans, by supporting this continuing resolution, have sought to put partisan politics aside to keep the government open for the American people, while the Appropriations Committee members hash out full-year appropriation bills under what we call regular order. Now, obviously, for the last 40 days, the taxpayers of this country and every citizen see daily demonstrated Democrats have had other plans other than just a clean funding resolution. They have not put their policy priorities to the side. They've taken the American people hostage by refusing to vote for a government funding unless it includes their partisan priorities. Top of their list is extension of the Biden-era COVID subsidy for Obamacare. Now understand, what we're talking about was instituted because we had a COVID shutdown of government and people were hurt because the government decided in early 2020, at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, that 22 million people should be put in the unemployment rolls. That's what happens when government shuts down the economy. So, this is a subsidy Democrats decided to sunset at the end of this year. Now the Democrats shut down the government to continue what was meant to be a temporary program. And something we learn from the word temporary program or temporary taxes is everybody soon decides temporary becomes permanent. These expanded subsidies that go back to the beginning of the COVID era go to big insurance companies for Americans over 400% of federal poverty level. Now, can you believe it? What I mean when I say over 400% poverty level, that could include people making over $600,000 a year. I want to make clear, this expiration is only about the expanded temporary COVID subsidies. So everybody else that depends upon the subsidy for Obamacare, I want to make very clear to them that the premium subsides for individuals and families under 400% of the federal poverty level that existed prior to COVID are permanent law, and those people will not be affected because that permanent law is not being changed by anything that we're debating here today. Permanent law, no change for those under 400% of poverty. Now, Mr. President, writing health care policy is our job, meaning the senators' jobs and House of Representatives' job. However, every one of us in this body knew that this deadline that we're talking about was approaching, and we had already made plans to address the policy issues later in the year. Yet, as we find out now for the last 40 days, that timeline was not satisfactory to the Democrats. I've been in the elected office a long time, and taking government hostage and shutting it down is always a losing proposition. It costs money to shut the government down. It costs money to open the government up, and we find out little is accomplished. In the process, government's supposed to be service to the American people, and when there's 700,000 federal employees sitting at home, probably going to be paid because they always have been paid, they can't serve the American people, and the government is not doing its job. So in my view, this shutdown was doomed from the start. But Democrats marched forward anyway, following their leaders into the mess that we now have had for the last 40 days. On day 38, now 2 days ago, so 38 days after government shut down, Leader Schumer came to the Senate floor and unveiled his big plan. On day 38, he came with the Democrats' first plan, get the American people out of this government shutdown. Now, why would he wait 38 days? Why would he wait? If you were serious about a bipartisan solution to lower the cost of health care for the American people, I don't believe you would sit idle for 38 days before making an offer. I've shared the pain the shutdown has inflicted upon Iowans, but it bears repeating. I have families calling my office, asking where they can get food. Our food banks are overrun as Thanksgiving is just a few weeks away. Now, I want to give you an example that was reported by the person behind this constituent in the checkout line. One of my constituents, while grocery shopping at Walmart in Marion, Iowa, was left with no groceries for her family when she found out at the cash register that her food stamps were not on her debit card. That kind of uncertainty has real-world impacts. The realization brought this constituent to tears, it was reported to me. And why wouldn't you go into tears? Let's just take a moment to think about how you would feel coming home empty-handed from the grocery store and the stress it inflicts on families. Perhaps your kids are crying because they're hungry. Young farmers can't get their loan money from the Department of Agriculture during this government shutdown, and these young farmers are already in an ag economy that's underwater. How are they going to keep their business going? And then, I don't know what percentage of the American public flies every day, but it's significant that flights are being canceled left and right because air traffic controllers aren't being paid. That means people who are trying to get to a sick family member or attend a sister's wedding may not make it on time. Law enforcement, including our own Capitol Police that we rub shoulders with every day here, are working overtime and not being paid. The entire federal workforce is not being paid. 3 million people who have families and bills to pay. Now, that's just 4 or 5 examples. Unfortunately, the list could go on. I often say Washington, D.C., right where we're standing now, this town and the people that are in it live and work in an island surrounded by reality. I've been begging Leader Schumer to give just 5 Democrats the go-ahead to join us in a common sense, clean funding bill. Let me remind you that Democrats voted for this same structure of a clean funding resolution at least 13 times during the 4 years of President Biden. So I would ask them, what's wrong with voting for a clean funding resolution during this year and during this shutdown, or to prevent this shutdown? The answer is the American people elected a new president, and that president is not a Democrat. Well, elections have consequences. In a democratic republic, the will of the people is exercised by voters, and congressional leaders must respect that and live with the consequences. It's past time the Democrat leaders cut loose their members who want to work in a bipartisan way. Iowans at my town meetings want more bipartisanship out of Washington. They're cynical that all we do is fight and nothing ever gets done. I try to educate them on how it's not as bad as what they see on TV, and senators really do want to legislate and serve the American people. So let's roll up our sleeves, get the job done. The American people deserve better. I yield the floor.
Mr. President, today the Senate Appropriations Committee advanced legislation to reopen government immediately, funding vital programs and resuming pay for federal workers whom for the last 40 days have had to live with the stress of missed paychecks and not knowing when they would be paid. Under our legislation, all federal employees, including members of our military and Coast Guard, the Capitol Police officers, Border Patrol agents, TSA screeners, air traffic controllers, all will receive their back wages. It is significant that this measure also includes 3 full-year, fiscal year 2026 appropriations bills, including the annual agriculture FDA bill, the military construction and Veterans Affairs legislation, very timely given that Veterans Day will soon be upon us, and the legislative branch funding. This 3-bill package, which originally passed the Senate on August 1st with overwhelming bipartisan support, 87 votes in 2 cases, 81 in another, will support our veterans, our troops, our farmers, and rural communities. Of note, this package will provide full-year funding for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, known as SNAP, and the Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for women, infants, and children, known as WIC. One of the most unfortunate and shameful consequences of the shutdown has been that these vital nutrition programs were in jeopardy for our most vulnerable families, including 170,000 Mainers who rely on the SNAP program. Other programs will be funded through January 30th, while the Senate and House continue our work on the remainder of the year-long appropriations bills. For example, funding for important programs like Head Start and such as the Low-Income Heating Assistance Program will now be restored. I look forward to voting for this legislation and ending the unnecessary harm to the security of our families and our nations. We must begin to act tonight. We must not delay any longer. Finally, Mr. President, I want to thank the many members on both sides of the aisle of the Appropriations Committee and the Senate leadership who have worked especially hard to bring this package together. And I would be remiss if I did not also thank our staff. My staff missed an entire night's sleep to get this package together and get the job done. Thank you, Mr. President. Again, I want to particularly thank the members of the Appropriations Committee, including the three who served as the subcommittee chairs, Senator Bozeman, Senator Hoeven, and Senator Mullen. I want to thank Senator Britt, who did an extraordinary amount of work, Lisa Murkowski, Mike Rounds, Jerry Moran, Sherry Moore Capito, Sidney Hyde-Smith, Deb Fisher. There's so many who worked so hard on this package. I want to thank each and every one of them. Let's get the job done, and let's do it fast. Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Hoeven in my list. Senator Hoeven was a rock star, so I want to make sure that I mentioned him. Thank you.
Senator from Vermont.
I understand that the way the process has been developed, it is impossible to delay the votes that are going to take place. And if that were not the case, that is certainly what I would do, because I think it is important that the American people fully understand what is being voted on today. Everybody in America knows that our current healthcare system is broken, it is dysfunctional, it is cruel, it is by far the most expensive healthcare system in the world, and the only healthcare system of any major country that does not guarantee healthcare to all people as a human right, covering every man, woman, and child. We are unique in that respect. And yet tonight, what this Senate is about to do is make a horrific situation even worse. So let's be clear what this vote is about. If this vote succeeds, over 20 million Americans are going to see at least a doubling in their premiums in the Affordable Care Act. In my state of Vermont and throughout this country, for certain groups of people, it will be a tripling and a quadrupling of their premiums. There are people who will now be paying 50% of their limited incomes for health care. Does anybody in the world think that makes sense? And if this resolution is passed tonight, we are on a pathway to throw 15 million Americans off of Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act. 15 million. Our job is to create universal health care, guarantee health care to every man, woman, and child, not throw 15 million people off the health care they have, low-income and working-class people. And my friends, know what you are voting on. Studies are out there that when you throw 15 million people off of health care, some 50,000 of our fellow Americans will die unnecessarily every single year. Anyone think that's funny? Something to laugh at? Something to just go past? I don't. 50,000 Americans die unnecessarily. Now, I know as part of this resolution that the majority leader is going to say, well, Democrats can put together their own bill, and it'll come to the floor here in the Senate for a vote. As everybody here knows, that is a totally meaningless gesture. You can get 100 votes here in the Senate. Won't mean anything because the House is not going to take it up, and the President of the United States certainly will not sign it. So, Mr. President, I hope that anybody here who is thinking of voting for this reconsiders goes back home and talks to their constituents and asks them what it will mean if their health care premiums are doubled or tripled. Thank you, Mr. President.
The Democratic leader.
Mr. President, America is in the midst of a Republican-made health care crisis, worse than anything the American people have seen in decades. Republicans have spent the past 10 months dismantling the health care system, skyrocketing costs, and making every day harder for American families. Because of Republicans, Americans are going to suffer immensely as this health care crisis gets worse. Democrats have been fighting to end this crisis over and over again. Democrats have wanted to lower costs, but Republicans fought us every step of the way. We gave Republicans not one, not two, but 3 chances this year to extend the ACA premium tax credits. Republicans said no every time. On Friday, we offered Republicans a compromise, a proposal that would extend the ACA tax credits for a year and open up the government at the same time. They once again said no. And when they said no on our compromise, they showed that they are against any health care reform. Instead, they passed the biggest health care cuts in our nation's history just to give tax breaks to billionaires, and even then, they weren't satisfied with merely closing hospitals and community health clinics. They callously did nothing to deal with the looming crisis of ACA credits. Premiums will spike by thousands of dollars a month. Millions will lose insurance. Democrats have sounded the alarm. We have demanded for months to meet with the Republican leadership. But Republican leaders refuse to even discuss the issue, let alone negotiate it. We've asked them to meet in the summer and throughout the shutdown. To this day, Republicans still say no. We asked President Trump to step in and meet with us to deliver lower health care for Americans, and instead, Donald Trump has taken the American people hostage, from cutting off food aid to hungry families and vets and seniors and kids, to manufacturing flight cancellations, to cutting off home heating aid, while he builds a billion-dollar ballroom with gold-plated toilets. Therefore, I must vote no. This health care crisis is so severe, so urgent, so devastating for families back home that I cannot in good faith support this CR that fails to address the health care crisis. But let me be clear. However this vote turns out, this fight will and must continue